Yeah.
It's we haven't quite completely rebounded, of course, but we're steady. And I don't know, this next wave of issues we're having with COVID, I don't know how that's going to pan out, but we're hanging tight so far. No big changes yet. So we're just treading water at the moment.
So when they say like the state of Nevada has had record gaming revenues this year, that doesn't necessarily translate into additional feedstock for you necessarily, or it's not.
Correct. That just means the hotels have cut out everything that doesn't make them a dollar.
Oh, okay.
So sustainability, as you might imagine, is at the bottom of that list of things to bring back. So, yep.
Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed to get all those, figure out some way to open up all those buffets and have people start wasting a lot of food.
There you go.
Right on.
Hungry pigs. We got pigs to feed.
Right on. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. And thank you everyone for being on this call. You know, we've kind of almost reached the halfway mark, or I guess a little more than halfway in this process, and we had some great discussions, and now it's kind of coming down to where we need to start putting together some strategies and things like that. Again, thank you all very much for all the input that you've made so far. Again, at this point, we just have to start looking at specifically, and it can be on a high level. I don't know if you had a chance to look at the agenda. These are kind of high level options and strategies, but we just need to start working towards that conclusion, where I think that Kayla, in February, the middle of February, we're going to have the draft finished up, and you guys are going to publish it to God and everybody in March, huh?
Yeah, so we'll be presenting the draft menu of options to everyone at the end of the midterm presentation next Wednesday. So if you guys don't have that on your calendar, please let me know. Make sure, as I said, we'll send out that draft. That way you guys can view and comment on every single working group. And then we plan on, publishing it to the entire world towards the end of March. I'm thinking March 31st is the day that we're going to publish it.
Very good. So just looking through there, and Kayla, thank you very much for putting these things together before. So we've talked about what are the strategies, or do you guys just kind of putting everything together? We're looking at increasing demand for the compost product. Again, looking at the difference between food waste and organics, like tree trimmings and all that. I think we established that it's important to look at those two things separately, because they're a separate product, and a lot of the issues, there's a lot of issues with food waste, maybe not so much with organics. But Cody, is that pretty much? I think that's because you deal mostly in the just green waste, composting and recycling, where Clinton, you deal more with the food waste.
You got it. Yes.
So real quick, does anyone have any, we talked about, publicizing the need, the benefits of composting, looking at, educating, well, not educating, but just making people aware of the benefits of composting and diversion, and ways in which we can do that. Was there any other, methods? I know we talked about, short of legislation, which is a different department in this PSN, but what do you think would be some of the more effective strategies that we have for increasing the demand for the compost? Sound like it.
And if there is legislation, Dean, that would be helpful, it's okay to list them within your section of the menu of options. So if there's,
Okay.
yeah, like I said, yep, this is the menu of options. So we're going to identify all the options here, including legislative.
So again, that this is a very high level. I mean, we don't have to get down to the nitty gritty, but for instance, we can talk about legislation, or we could even talk about, education in the schools, that sort of thing would be appropriate at this stage to list some of our strategies. Okay.
Yeah, and then so just to maybe kind of help you a little bit. So if this group decides that, a certain piece of legislation should move forward, then we'll move it to the policy change and funding groups. That way they can funnel it through. So you guys are the ideas, the brainstormers, and then we can push all of those ideas outwards to other groups. Does that help a little bit, Dean?
Yeah, no, that's great. So we shouldn't get too much tied down in the weeds as far as what group this is in or this, that. I mean, and looking through that Connecticut thing, it had a lot of cross contamination, if you will, with some of the other groups. So again, this is just, we're brainstorming broad strategies in which we can increase the demand. So I guess we'll start out with, legislation, maybe, education in schools.
Yeah, and Dean, I see that Mark has his hand raised.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Alrighty, Mark.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I was going to say, we actually are addressing some of that in the schools right now with, it's part of our Waste Warriors lesson, and that's going really well. I wanted to throw out another one that we are doing occasionally that more people could take the opportunity to take advantage of would be, we write articles every now and then for local publications. And we've got one actually right now that's in the process of being written for Edible Reno. I don't know if you've seen that magazine. And we're actually highlighting the article. It's going to be called Food for Thought. And it talks a lot about food waste and reducing that food waste. It's more of at a kind of a grassroots level. It's not the larger corporate level, but it's certainly one of those things that helps to get that in the mind of the community. So
yeah, so any kind of publicity, even going down to from billboards to Facebook pages or anything like that would be a way, again, to start pushing the awareness of composting. And I think that's where we're going to have, besides legislation, really the biggest impact on the demand is just educating and making people aware of, of the benefits of composting, both organic waste and food waste. I think Wes raised his hand. What do you think, Wes?
I was trying to get my camera to go. There it goes. So I completely agree. I think that we also have to balance the education with what you are also allowed to do and what you aren't allowed to do, so that we don't end up essentially creating some issues for local government and local jurisdictions for enforcement, things like that. I know, for example, because I talked to Clint in a previous meeting, we had a quick conversation, and I know about Cody's process to the south of us, but we don't have opportunities locally in the northern region that.
There you go. Wes froze up.
For it, my screen froze. But so we have just, it's a regional issue. There are opportunities in other areas that might make it easier, but one of the aspects to this as we move forward, Mark's group does a fantastic job educating in the schools, and they do hit a bunch of schools. We have another local small entity that does some things local on their site for education and teaching and things like that. But we don't have locations here that would allow large scale operations unless there were haulers and bins and all of those things that go in regulatorily. So I think as we do education, we have to speak strictly to what is available so that we don't end up almost making like a bad pitch. We tell people
Yeah.
to do it. We end up with myself and the cities coming out and citing people for doing it. Right. That's not
Right.
the right message.
Right. No, I think it's very good. Well, in fact, more on a larger scale, of course. One of the things that California did in addition to their legislation is they also amended their CEQA requirements to facilitate the fast track approval of composting facilities and other digester facilities. So that was probably one of the first times that I've been involved with where they actually did things in unison that made sense. But you're absolutely right. I mean, and we discussed some of those constraints previously, as far as, the pathogens with using the food waste as part of the composting and things like that. And it's all very prescriptive. And Kayla, you did a little bit of work on looking at the permits and still there's no necessarily structure or format for the permits in Nevada for composting or digesters.
We do for regular composting, through windrows. We don't for aerobic digesters. And
Okay.
anaerobic digesters. So that's still potentially, we'll have to figure out how to clarify that. Or does it fall under a different regulation? So that could be, one of the legislative routes that you guys want to,
Okay.
if you decide to pursue that.
Yeah.
To see
Okay.
what other states are doing, and is that something you want to leave alone here, explore, just as an option. Many of options.
Yeah. Well, and I kind of get hung up. It's kind of like when, when my, wife asks me about something, I try to go too quickly to the solution instead of, going through the brainstorming and trying to understand. So I think that's very good. That is very good advice.
Good analogy.
So, is there anything else that you folks can think of? Anything we discussed before about a good way to drive demand for these products? I think legislation or certainly.
Sorry, I've been so
municipal-
silent. Cody's been. I'm attempting to manage a baby while my wife is at an appointment.
Oh no!
Haven't figured this out yet. So just from the email that you guys sent earlier, and then just like Wes was just saying, I think it's just careful consideration. It's a bummer. Like I want to see all organics composted right now. I'm ready. Here we are.
Yeah.
Let's do it. But there's just a lot of factors involved. So I think first, I think education is our biggest push, is to educate the public in general on what they can do themselves for reduction. I think number one is reduction, especially when it comes to food waste and even yard waste and green waste. So that also plays into, water saving and everything else. I mean, if you're going to put in a water efficient landscape, that's going to cut down on your green waste because you'll have a water efficient landscape. If you cut
Right.
down on your food waste, you don't have to compost as much. So I think reduction and education on reduction is our biggest push that you can do, just to make just to move that forward. Then after that is potentially education on options for how people can process their own materials. And as a backyard, I mean, it's only going to be a solution for some people that want to do it, but at least if we had good options out there for backyard composting, for education and marketing for the other options like Clint, like me, KTMB's program. I think a lot of the times people just don't even know what's out there. And if there's an easier way to get that information to the people to know what they can and cannot do, is going to be helpful. And it's just, again, we just need to be mindful of all the players involved and how that works. But I think that, KTMB's program up in Northern Nevada for recycling Christmas trees, that's really marketed well, and people know that it's there, so they can do that. And then, so education, what the people can do themselves. And then when we move on to the larger scale programs, that's the part where I'm not really sure how to tackle it. There's, like was already mentioned, there's legislation, there's regulation.
Right.
And really that's kind of the movement. I think things, again, are in the works already just because of consumer demand. As the consumer and companies demand more and more, the programs start happening. That's the key. I mean, so I just had a new company reach out about recycling biodegradable foam. I don't know, something. So, I mean, there's people that are looking for all these options. And so I think that the consumer demand will push regulation and change. I don't know if it's something that the group needs to do, but again, at the same time, it could be. With mandates and regulation, we just need to have proper plans in place, and that's the key. So potentially in the menu of options is almost like a sustainability plan, like was mentioned in the other group, is if we do decide to do large scale organics diversion, maybe this group's best poised to put together how that works in the first place, you know, and maybe, I mean, that's what we are tasked to do, but at the same time is really outline the larger side of this rather than just education and marketing, and say, okay, how would this work? And we start with a test pilot of Reno, or we take Carson City's program that's working right now with residential green waste. Okay, what does that do? How does it work? How does it move to the next steps? If we do want to do food waste, and really get some of this stuff more into an outlined format, just because there is so much at play. We need so many of these stakeholders together to really make these programs work efficiently, and for everybody, you know, to do it correctly. Like Truckee, California, I mean, they're pushing fast. Things are moving. They're building new recycling plants and doing all these things. And so other states are doing it. Just how do we do it?
Yeah, you know, I mean, certainly California passed that, you know, legislation, and I think they started enforcing it or something like that, maybe just a couple of months back. That got everybody's attention. That's taken a kind of a big hammer to the problem, you know. But maybe with some of these, like as we've discussed, trying to create that value in the product, and if you can't create the value in the product, then I guess that's when you get out the big hammer and just tell everyone they have to do it or else, you know.
Well, Dean, I was just going to add that I think the biggest motivator for anybody is going to be the economics. When it becomes more expensive to dispose of rather than divert, then you'll see increased diversion, of course.
Yeah.
And that's just something that we're so not in control of. And I don't know how the group, you know, pushes for something like that, because nobody wants price increases. But at the same time, the only way you get diversion is for something to not be as cheap as going to the landfill in most cases.
Yeah.
And so, again, this group, I don't know if this is the place to do it or how it's done, but I mean, once waste diversion is cheaper, then it happens.
Yeah. You're right. You are right, and that's where it's going to be a big, kind of a big boat to turn around, you know, to make that happen. But I think for the purposes of, you know, this group, Kayla, I mean, we're coming up with these ideas as far as long-term kind of 10,000-foot strategies, and then I guess the next iteration of what NDEP decides to do with this information would be where we would be getting to some of these more site-specific planning and other types of things.
Yeah, and it'll be really what the group decides to do with this information, how they can start moving forward. I know I just want to, Wes has his hand raised. But yes,
sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, after we introduce the menu of options, they'll move in the implementation phase. So right now is the time to start creating that structure that you're talking about, Cody. What needs to start happening to slightly start turning this boat, you know, or at least just providing options for how can we start making improvements. Like Wes,
So real quick, Cody, I think you had some fantastic ideas, and I think one of those components to creating that educational side would be not only having do it, but putting it together in an easy packet. So maybe some sort of, here's, easy to do composting packet that you request and get dropped off to your house, something like that, that actually aids people in getting on board, because that's one of the hardest things that we all, I think, face is, everybody wants to recycle or do this, but then they have to actually do the work. So I think there's a bridge that we can create in not just providing educational resources and things like that, but maybe some sort of a composting packet, or here's your 3 gallon, your 3 5-gallon buckets, and this is how you do it in a step-by-step process, or however it's done. And we could even market it with, input from our major composters here in the state. So we could even do some stickers on them or things like that from the major players in the state that help provide and build these things. So we end up creating a circle of knowledge, so to speak, where you get the information, you request these things, you are able to see the information on the buckets. It's an easy 1, 2, 3 how-to, and how to process these things and how to do that. And that might be able to help start getting to where Cody was talking about, is how do you build the engagement? We have a bunch of people with wants, but we need to build the engagement. So maybe that's a good first.
No, that is perfect, Wes. Perfect. Before I move on to the next one, anything else? Anything else you want to talk about on creating the demand? I think we covered it pretty well. And we'll certainly during our next meeting have a different shot at it. My idea is to get all this, down on paper and then distribute it, or have Kayla help me distribute it, because I keep messing that up. Distribute it to everybody so that you can revise it or add information. I think might be the easiest way. But I think our next major thing is, and we've talked a lot about that already, is how to increase the amount of organics diverted from the landfill. And I think that kind of goes part and parcel with what we've been discussing as far as the education and getting people, I think, Wes, that idea of, really helping people be aware of composting and where their material goes, and having, the easy to follow instructions and buckets and systems, that we can start, getting school kids and families engaged in, that would certainly, help start that awareness, so people are not sending everything to the, to the landfill. But what, do you guys have any other thoughts around that? Or, short of, again, like California did, where they just came in with the big hammer and legislated and said you can't do it anymore. I think doing the same thing with the, with the education and awareness is going to be our best options there. But
I think some diversion, and maybe this is where Kayla, EPA, we've never been good as a compost company on like getting incentive programs of some type of way. If there was the ability for money, in any of these larger programs to incentivize waste diversion, that's where you're going to really make some moves. And there's so much material that's currently out there that is moving nowhere, or moving to a landfill or somewhere, just because there's not enough money to process the materials. So like in a really big picture, fuels mitigation for fire prevention in the Sierras is all dependent on the Forest Service removing those, and or any other of those groups removing those fuels from the forest. So who pays for that? Usually there's government money for it, but if there's programs that, when you see the scale of them, that if we could find the money to mitigate and move materials to composting or to waste diversion into any, doesn't have to be composting, to energy generation, to anything, to take those organic materials and move them somewhere. It's usually just getting them out of where they are, processing them, and moving and hauling them. So like the hauling rates, just the haul is the most expensive part. I mean, right now with diesel costs, there might be, okay, hey, I can afford the company, or say it's the forester, I can afford to process the material at a rate, but I can't afford to haul it there. So who's going to pay to haul it? So I guess it's trying to find money, or again, these aren't solutions, but that's really where it comes down to, is the cost of getting material to processors, because the processors are here. It's just the cost of getting that material to the processor or getting it out of wherever it is.
Right, right. And do you know, in Carson City, do you know how, if they have a separate green waste, trash can? I mean, do they have a whole separate refuse truck that picks that up, or how do they?
And I don't know.
How do they
I don't know
manage that?
if anybody from WM's on the line or not. But if not, I mean, I can't speak specifically to their program. I don't know 100%. But to my knowledge, this is why these programs are so tough. So to my knowledge, the city voted to have green waste added to the program for all city residents. And from that addition, whoever had to haul that material, which it was Waste Management, had to do that program at the same rate as they did it without the program. And they had to add 2 trucks, 4 drivers, so it was a large cost associated to the hauler to add the program. They added the program. It's functioning. It's going well. And now they have to haul it to a composter, me, and they have to pay me to process it. So, I mean, the programs get very expensive very fast. And to my knowledge, they had to do it at the same rate they were doing it before. So again, there wasn't rate increases to help pay for the program. And so that's where, like in Truckee, I was reading on the article for them trying to create this new recycling program for organics in the city of Truckee, and they want to offer it free to everyone. And that's great. Oh my God, it'd be so awesome to have free something, but I guess I just don't know how it's getting paid for then. I mean, who's paying for the processing? Because nothing happens for free. And so
Right.
Just like in that example, the hauler, whoever the hauler may be, has to spend a bunch of money. The composters like us, we're spending a bunch of money upgrading our system just to process that amount of material that's now coming to us, because it tripled the amount of material. But again, it's there. And so that's an exact example of legislation. That was a city decision that forced the program to begin, and now it's happening. So again, I mean, I think really, without saying it straight, I mean, that's how these programs for the entire state have to start. And if like our recycling mandate for the state of Nevada is 25% recommended. Again,
Right.
there was a push a couple years back to make it mandatory, so at least we had a floor, but we're hitting the 25% recycling rate. So since we're hitting 25%, but what about 50%? I know, when do we get to the next level if we don't, push something? So really it will come down to regulation, but that's a fight to fight.
Yeah.
Hey, Cody.
Absolutely.
Hey, Cody, how clean is that material coming in from Truckee?
Mackinac. So the material, so Carson City is the green waste program that we're processing, and it started out really, really rough. It took 2 years, of the city itself really coming to terms with the program. And what Waste Management and us had to do is we had to implement pretty strict process and programs to remove contaminators. So really what happened was with this program, it got adopted. It went full bore. We had to push really hard education campaigns of what's compostable, what can go in the green waste bin, what can't. And then what we've been doing is doing hard data tracking to track contaminated areas of zones of the city that are contaminating. Then the hauler can, which on the hauler's dollar, has to then monitor all of the contaminators by putting in camera systems and trackers and stickering bins. Oh, you've put in plastic into your green waste bin. here's strike one. If you get 3 strikes, they pull your bin and you don't have the program anymore. The program wasn't mandatory in the first place, you know, so those, and we've kind of labeled it as a You Care, We Care program. Really, most of these organics programs of food waste, green waste, anything really should be implemented to the point where it's like, okay, the consumer, just like Wes was saying, if you have to do the work, only the people who are most dedicated are going to make the step to do that work.
Sure.
And so like a drop-off program. So for example, here's a great idea. For the city of Reno, at least, and this could be in Vegas too, is green waste drop-off locations in tandem with the waste haulers. So rather than a full program implementation across the city, that we have much more regular drop-off locations, like at KTMB. I've been talking with KTMB about doing this with them. If we get waste management on, we get KTMB, we get a zone, and once a month for Saturday and Sunday, there's volunteers that come and you can come drop off all your green waste, and it's free or not free. Who knows? We have to figure that part out. But you can drop it off. There's somebody there to watch it. There's people there to control contamination. And then we know that material goes to a composter, but the people who are bringing it there have to drive there. They have to bring their own material. So then they know that those guys are going, oh, there's a compost drop off. I want to go there. And then there's volunteers managing the contamination to say, okay, you can drop off. You can't, if you want to bring it back and clean it up, you can drop it off, but you got to clean it up type thing. Then that can actually get hauled and composted. So I think that might be a really good way of starting smaller scale, large programs with monthly. The city councilwoman, Naomi Dewar, was doing them here, and she got 2 bins on 2 different days dropped with waste management. And it was awesome. They filled them up. People came, residents came. It was super clean. It's when that's the problem with the regulation and mandates, is that if you do it too quick, the material is just destroyed. And back to Clint, what you said is that it took 2 full years, and the actual crazy part is that the volume of material has decreased by almost 40% because there's so many contaminators that people just don't have the program anymore. But now you have the core of the people of the city that really want to do it, and the program's great for those people.
And hopefully they can build on that, you know, as like you say, going back and putting in the education, getting people to understand the importance of what they're doing, and you know, hopefully they can, you know, expand now that you have a good system and some, I guess, some motivated folks to do that. Hopefully it can kind of grow from there.
I was just going to add that, you know, we have a little drop off in front of our office here, and from time to time I just see people, it's a word of mouth thing. People just come and drop off stuff from out of their fridge and freezer right here in their front yard, and the food with scrap totes, and you know, we pick them up twice a week. So
cool.
It's got to start somewhere.
Yeah, those are the kind of things to start this whole process.
This is Wes, and I think those are all great things. And I think you know, at Cody's program down there, it does work, and it was very difficult for waste management. I think one of the other issues that we all have to be they also didn't have any large scale compost processors available for food to go to. So some of that is being.
Wes, I'm sorry to interrupt. We didn't hear the first part of what you said.
Oh, I was wondering if that happened. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I hate to interrupt, but yeah, I want to make sure that we heard you.
No, you're good. So I think one of the risks that are there when we go, if you move too fast and we create a regulation or a rule, as I've explained to a ton of people, I can write any rule and do anything locally. That's not necessarily an issue. The issue is can we actually accomplish that? And one of the risks would be, I don't believe locally we could do the same thing as Carson unless Cody can take all of the green waste, because the waste management facility here in Lockwood doesn't take it. They don't have a green waste compost over there yet. So we don't actually have the physical capability in this region to do a rule that could realistically be implemented. And as much as it pains me to say, like how fast could we go and work, those kind of things make it difficult. I think those become the big picture things that, as we in this group have the opportunity to think about, we think about how do we create the opportunity for those things to continue moving forward and build that capacity to meet those rules, right? That's the big key. Instead of jumping up against a brick wall, we figure out how to build the bridge over it
Right.
or through it. We can go through it too. That's another option.
Well, and Wes, to that point too. So, I mean, that's the other caveat of that is that's where regulation pushes those things to happen. So like right now, full circle, we invested in the largest greenway sorting system on the West Coast, and we don't even have the material to run it. But the reason why did I invest in it? Because I know Reno's coming and Washoe County's coming, and we're building it now because whenever the decision makers make the decision that it's going to have time, we have the system that can process that much material. So, for example, the private industry works looking at those types of interactions. And so like right now, I mean, I could easily, again, I wouldn't say easily, in the world of processing, there's still the world of permitting and all those other things that come along with it. But in the world of processing, we could process, I would say 80% of the city of Reno right now, the entire city.
Hey,
I mean,
Wow.
oh, he cut
some
off.
trucks will make. Saying get some trucks. Let's make it happen.
And so, well, and that's where, so some of these smaller ways to get this built up and this program started, just like I had said, with these weekly or monthly drop-off options, I think are really the way to start out, is because then at least the education really starts with those that are most concerned, the you care, we care. We find, the biggest one is to find locations that have somebody to watch the material, because if you just have open bins somewhere and open drop off, like even if you go to any of the rock haulers that accept green waste, so like right here in Sparks, Oxborough Trucking accepts green waste. They haul it all to the landfill anyway, but they'll accept anything. There can be concrete rocks with your grass clippings. So when it gets to a composter, we're so much more specific that then landscapers, the larger groups that are recycling the organic materials go, oh, well, I'm really used to just dumping off whatever I want. So what happens is as long as we have somebody to watch the material and we can start to hone in those groups of people that really want to take the material to composting or to diversion, then that'll bring those people to the option. And then when it goes big scale, those companies like myself, and if the city of Reno or the Nevada as a whole, there's two big time retail composters, but just say there's about 6 composting operations in the entire state, where California has, 500.
Yeah.
As soon as regulation happened, then you have options. You know what I mean? Because there's money to be made. If there's the money to be made, that goes back to our other points of currently in the state of Nevada, our pricing structures don't make sense for anybody to make money. So who knows if somebody will come in and actually want to do what we do.
Well, and I think, Cody, a lot of those topics relate to two of you guys' other objectives, the decreasing contamination and, as Wes was stating, the improving composting infrastructure in these different areas. So I think those all tie together very well.
Yeah. No, they absolutely do, and that's great to know, Cody, that you have all this, made the investment to have all this capacity. And was there a big hurdle that you had to get over with regards to any sort of permitting, or say if you wanted to, double the footprint of your facility, is that something that's, easily done, or how is the local regulatory environment for doing such a thing? Is it easy, hard, or what do you think?
No, so it's hard. Kayla is in on the groups, there that we're she just wrote me an email today. We're doing new permitting for our current site location as we speak. really, and like what Wes was saying, I mean, like for Full Circle, the next big move is to have another site somewhere. You know, we need a site closer to where the material is generated, so you don't have to haul so far. So in the world of, you know, what if people really want organics diversion, but they don't want a compost site in their backyard. So then when you think of these large municipalities, where's the compost site go? So when we think of these big picture items, it's like for us, even as a company, we're like, okay, well, where would we go? Can we actually go anywhere near Reno, Nevada that's not any closer than my current facility where it's at in Carson? You know, and I don't know.
Yeah.
And then the permitting is completely different because Washoe County and Clark County have their separate permitting, where the rest of Nevada is under NDEP. So
Right.
it's a whole different group, you know, to deal with. But no, permitting and that is going to be difficult, and growing to the size that we need to is going to be difficult. See, and that's where I guess in the world of help for myself and any group and these organics diversions programs in general is, if something is desired by the community, but then how do you get, if something's desired by the community to a specific scale, but there aren't the regulatory ability for the scale to even be there, how can you even create the program in the first place? You know, that's the big question that we're looking at now, is like, if you want to process the entire city of Reno and Sparks, where do you put a compost site and how can you get that permitted? I mean, that's a big facility. You're talking very big.
You know, I know down in Southern California, they got, I think they rail haul, they ship everything out of the Los Angeles Basin. LA County Sanitation District has that facility, you know, 30 miles outside of Bakersfield. But it is a very expensive facility, and I cannot even imagine what the costs are. But, you know, there's no one around you for 15 miles currently. I mean, in 5 years it may be different, but that is certainly a problem. You know, who's going to want to have a composting facility, even though, you know, you do it correctly, you manage a lot of the odors and everything, but still from the trucks.
I was just going to say, same issues with the livestock operation. Nobody wants that in their backyard. We've spent many years trying to find a location, and wouldn't you know it, you know, and Nevada is what, over 90% BLM property, right? So it's impossible to find any privately held land close enough to the city, which would not be a problem to the occupants of the city. So that's why we ended up with being on the landfill site here at in Las Vegas, at the Apex landfill site, and Republic is our leaseholder.
Okay.
So, but yeah, just like what Cody was saying, we put in the investment to service the city, and we're prepared to take on all the food that Las Vegas has to offer, plus anything from out of state we can accept, which we're doing more right now because we just don't have a whole lot in the city right now. But yeah, it's challenging with the permitting, and yes, it's just chiming in with what Cody said there. Same issues.
Now, Clint, what's been the barrier? You know, you have very successful operation, you know, down there in Las Vegas. What's been the barrier for you to having something up here in Northern Nevada, or have you looked at a Northern Nevada? Yeah,
we have, and but that was quite a few years ago. You know, I think that as the environment changes with the desire for more food scrap diversion, then yeah, I think we might be able to revisit that option. But right now, we're just focusing on trying to get this operation up and going to the level that we expect it to be, which COVID put a big dent in. It's been a problem on us. Yeah.
Okay, and you haven't been able to avail yourself of any, you know, grants or subsidies or anything like that. You've had it made it work just from a flat value proposition of the material coming in. And...
Correct. Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
No government help other than PPP money, basically.
Okay. And then I think a lot of what we talked about also goes along with improving the, the infrastructure for digesters. That's a little different thing, whether they be aerobic or anaerobic. And I think that goes a long ways. I mean, I think at the end of the day, that probably is the probably the best solution for the food waste, just due to the quality requirements and the pathogens and things like that. Cody, and I think you've mentioned during previous meetings that you've looked at how to incorporate food waste into your process, and it was very costly from the the depackaging and just everything else and the pathogens, and just really wasn't worth your time, was it?
Well, we process about 30 tons a week. That's it. And we are doing the city of Southlake commercial food waste, the city of Truckee's commercial food waste, and then there's various Walmarts and other stores that are picked up. So we do weekly food waste composting. It's mainly that, so our program, we've mandated to the participants that it's food only. So there's no compostable plastics, no paper, no nothing. It's just food only. And that's been the easiest education campaign for us, especially when it comes to composting food waste. Once you start implementing, our site used to take everything. We took anything you could say that's compostable, and our contamination rates were at like 90% contamination.
Oh, wow.
We'd sit and pick materials all day, and it took us forever to process that material. And then about 3 years ago, we went to food only. Now our main contamination is the stickers on produce from the grocery stores that are picked up. And then if the restaurants do any small contamination, but South Tahoe Refuse and Tahoe Truckee Sierra Disposal have very good education campaigns for their cities. And they follow that food only. As we grow, our plan is to be able to take more food waste, but that's where you get into the depackager, just like you said, Dean. And what happens there is once you then allow compostable plastics, but if you run everything through a depackager, the compostable plastics go to the landfill anyway. So you really just go back to a food only program, because the depackager separates the food and anything that's not food. So really it comes down to just have food only programs. Down to earth composting, that smaller hauler here in Reno they have about 200, 300 subscribers, and their material is food only. That's brought down to our facility as well. And it's great. I mean, they're picking up residential food waste. It's on the small scale, but I mean, 200-300 subscribers is great.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, food grows, but it's just that the problem we sell organic certified compost, and food waste is just tricky to get organic certified. So we make food waste compost that we sell only to Caltrans and to non-certified organic. So we have to keep the entire program separate. And it's not guaranteed that I'm going to sell that compost because we sell so much organic compost. And so really it's just finding the market for food waste compost if people want it. A lot of times people actually don't want food waste. When they get a sticker in their compost and they go, oh, why is there a sticker in my compost? But at the same time, they want us to take their food waste. And so it's very interesting.
Hey, Cody, are you able to take meat and dairy as well?
We try to limit it. I mean, when it comes to commercial programs, it's supposed to be food scraps only. And if, say, like a freezer fails, they're supposed to take the meat to rendering,
Right.
We try to avoid it. But at the same time, we hand pick all of our food waste for contamination. So 30 tons hand picked with pitchforks. So we see everything in it.
Sure.
And so like when we talk about scale, food waste on a huge scale, we can't process. That's the one item I can't process at scale right now, is because we hand sort everything. You have to figure out sorting systems, which are depackagers, and the depackager to process the city, is about $1 million. So you better be getting paid enough money on the food waste to be able to buy $1 million depackager to process that.
Yep. That's what we got. Just sitting there. Idle.
Idle, yeah. You're paying for it every month. You just look at it.
That's right.
Now, how much testing do you have to do, Cody, to certify your compost, or if it's used in a non-food producing application, can you give to the highway department or Caltrans without a whole lot of testing of the food waste compost?
So yeah, there's specific mandates from NDEP that we follow, but technically our company, we follow the U.S. Composting Council's Seal of Testing Assurance program. So we test everything 3 times a year. All right, sorry, everything 1 time every 3 months, and that's for pathogens, nutrients, heavy metal content, process control sheets, how long we have to cook and clean everything. Since we sell stuff on the market to consumers, we go very heavy on our testing. Technically speaking, you don't have to have as much testing as you would think you would need in the world of composting, but we go to because we don't want to get sued. I mean, as a private company, we go as heavy as we need to go, so we make sure we stay in business.
Okay.
But the U.S. Composting Council Seal of Testing Assurance program is kind of this gold standard for compost. And there's only one company that does that in Nevada, and there it's us.
Good deal. Good deal. So the composting, certainly, I know we talk about, anaerobic and aerobic digesters. Do you necessarily, Clinton and Cody, the rest of you, do you necessarily see a place for that? Especially, I know on the large scale anaerobic digesters, especially, it's a lot. They can take the dairy, they can take the meat. They do deep packaging, but it's a lot, larger scale, and they're, water tank sized, structures that go through a series of processes. Do you, what's your guys' opinion on that necessarily, or do you think that that's a good idea, bad idea? Do you see that as a strategy that could be implemented, or is that, kind of so far off in the future?
There's a digester here in Vegas, and they've been trying to get it to work. They don't have a good stream for it yet. It's been many years. I don't think it's been very effective. But yeah, I mean, it should be an option, obviously, but it's super expensive, especially for more rural areas. I just don't see that being an option in rural areas. So, yeah.
It's cost, just like Clint said, it's cost and material flow. I mean, I think digestion is a perfect option, especially if you can create energy with it as well. We're really into the mixture, and I'd mentioned this in a previous one of this composting eco campus, and that can be cogeneration and compost, that can be biogeneration and anaerobic digestion with composting. You can create energy, you can create compost, because then there's more marketplaces for more types of materials.
Right.
But it really all comes down to price and flow of material. There's no flow of material because there's no mandate to recycle. And then if there is flow right now, the price is so low to process the material, you couldn't buy it. You couldn't fund a digester. It just doesn't. Right. I mean, we're barely getting, on food waste. It fluctuates all the time too. But I mean, you got to be getting I think Seattle's at $100 a ton for mixed food waste. And some other places in California are up to $125 a ton, inbound. That's what they're charging people. And I mean, that's what you got to get paid to process how dirty this material is. Because again, if you don't sell it because it's too dirty, it's at your new compost landfill, which I've heard, that happens very easily. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that all of these options are wonderful. Again, I don't want to push regulation at all. But I mean, I think that's to really have this happen. You can't control pricing and demand, without getting the material. You can't. If you build it, they might not come.
That's right.
Yeah,
we found that out.
Clint, you invested big money. We invested big money.
Yeah.
If the material's not there and you can't pay the debt on the piece of equipment to process it, then you got to sell the piece of equipment.
Yeah, you got it.
yeah.
I wish we could do something like the $1 tire bill they had, for keeping tires out of the landfill.
Well, hey, that's a great, really, if people really, really care about landfill diversion, no matter what the material is, as soon as you have to pay more money too, or there's a tax
Yep.
on it, then you
You
can
got
fund
it.
stuff. So
You got
again, if we really do care as a state and as a group, you're going to either have to pay more money or you're going to have to work way harder. And one of those two, it seems that most people don't want to work anymore. So, and
Yeah.
we don't want to pay more money, but you're going to have to pay more money if you want the stuff to be green.
You got it. That's it.
Very good, guys. It's coming right up against the hour. Appreciate all your time. I think that based on everything that you've given, I should be able to put together some basic strategies on the way we would approach some of these things. And what I'll try to do is by end of the day Friday, get you out copies of these notes and everything, and if you guys could over the weekend just kind of review them and take a look at them so that we can get this information over to Kayla and NDEP. And anyway, when we start talking about this thing, I think it's very exciting, and as I think someone said earlier, you can say that you want organics diversion, but there's so much stuff that goes into it, and it's so multifaceted, from depackaging to transportation to legislation and permitting, and it is just, for me at least, a little mind-boggling, but I think this group's doing a lot of great stuff, making some first steps in the right direction, and at least identifying some of these things. And those of you that are in the industry, I think it's pretty cool what you're doing, as far as, food waste and composting and those sorts of things that you're doing already.
Thanks, man.
I think it's pretty
Yep.
cool.
Well, yeah,
Anyone,
send that out and we'll give as much information as I can this weekend.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. I'll make sure I get that. Anyone else? Mark, you have anything to add?
No, I'm good. I think what I'll do is I'll check and see if we had that article go out, and if it's been completed, I'll share it with you, and then you can ship it out to the group, because
Okay.
it does talk a lot of, it covers a lot of what we talked about today at the residential level. So
Wonderful. Wes, you got any last comments?
Sorry, trying to unmute. No, I'm good. Thank you, guys.
No, thank you, Wes. Todd?
I have nothing to add. Thanks.
Well, appreciate you being on the call, and I apologize. The other person on the screen is the 2984. But if go ahead.
Well, sorry, I'm not certain who that is, but we're really excited to have you guys all join the midterm meeting next Wednesday. I'm going to put another plug there.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Kayla. Thank you very much. And with that, if anyone else has anything else, great. If not, that midterm meeting will be outstanding. And thank you very much for all your contributions.
Thank you.
Thanks for your leadership, Dean.
Take care. Thanks, man.
Bye.
Bye.